Welcome to the Getting Into Good Trouble podcast, where we make it our mission to challenge, question, and inspire you to do the same. Here are your hosts.
I'm Vedika.
Hi, I'm Thomas.
What's up, I'm Micah.
I'm Isla.
And I'm Gracie.
So guys, we're going to be talking about gun control in New Zealand, but there's a new prime minister that might change these laws to better fit the people.
So there's a bit of a dichotomy in between what should and shouldn't be done. Some people are in favor of regulating the guns a little bit more so that things like this don't happen. But then again, some people want the freedom to own a gun and use it if it's for self-defense or maybe because they want to go hunting or whatever use they have for it. So our podcast is going to dive into both these sides and see where people are coming from.
So as previously stated, we're going to be talking about gun control in New Zealand. Both the new prime minister might be changing some of the laws that were put in place to better fit the people of New Zealand.
So what even is gun control?
Gun control is the regulation of use and sale of firearms. And a lot of countries have gun control to prevent reckless or careless people from buying guns or to prevent shootings from happening.
Why should we even care about it though?
Well, as Isla mentioned, back in 2019 there were some mass shootings, and this caused New Zealand to be a little bit stricter about who can carry a firearm. And all these laws were established in 2020, but it's still relevant now because after the election of the new prime minister in 2023, the citizens started kind of bringing up the fact that, hey, some of us are responsible with our firearms and we want to be able to use them. So they're trying to push for them to become a little bit more lenient about those laws. And there's a bit of a divide between this because some citizens are like, no, the laws are in place for a reason to stop violence from happening. So it's widely debated, what should we do next?
So if they really don't like the laws, why aren't they fighting back?
Well, there actually are some people fighting back. There have been protests and oppositions to the gun control laws in New Zealand right now, though most of those have been peaceful and all within legal means.
They're mainly trying to make the new prime minister change the laws.
Who's the new prime minister?
The new prime minister is Christopher Luxon, who's the 42nd prime minister of New Zealand, and he's in the New Zealand National Party.
So Christopher Luxon's stance on gun control is he's not for weapons, but he's not against them as much as the old one was either. As soon as the Christchurch shooting happened, he was very apologetic to the families and their loved ones, and he wanted to reduce guns around New Zealand, but he didn't want to entirely get rid of them. So he hasn't made any public comments about what laws he was going to change, but he said that he will, at some point in his service, change some of the laws.
Why do you think that is?
I think that there are a variety of reasons. Well, first of all, in order to get elected, he has to share his stance with the public, and if he takes a hard side, he might be less likely to be voted for by a mass amount of people. So I think he might be staying a little bit silent about this topic just so that the public stays in his favor.
And now, let's hear from someone directly involved in the debate. Please welcome our special guest, Ashley Lane.
So, have you noticed any changes after the laws were first passed in New Zealand?
So, which reform, in terms of which reform are you specifically talking to? What are you focusing on?
So, from the Christchurch shooting, from all the laws that were passed since then about regulating firearms in New Zealand, what's the biggest change that you've noticed since then?
I know that they did an amnesty of lots of guns. I don't know if you heard about that part of it, where they gave people time to hand in unregistered guns and I think get some money for those, which I thought was quite a good way to get perhaps guns off the street that perhaps people weren't going to otherwise, maybe honest people that wanted to get rid of them could get rid of them and maybe avoid them getting in the hands of the wrong people. So we thought was a good initiative. We had incredibly low gun crime for so long, you'd never hear about a gun in New Zealand 10 years ago, ever. And the police even are only allowed guns on their locked in their vehicle. In New Zealand, they don't even carry them on their body because it's gun crime was so low. But now some society things have changed in the last, I don't know if this is relevant to your story, but in the last maybe 5 years, the Australian government has started sending back people. Previously, there was like a free visa entry for New Zealanders into Australia. And so a lot of people moved to Australia, and some people that had never lived in New Zealand, like maybe had only left when they were 6 months old, and they'd got into criminal activity over there, were being sent back. And so that they're calling that the 501s, because that's the criminal code for whatever it is in Australia. And that's dramatically increased gun crime, but not the kind of gun crime that terrorism situation in Christchurch. It was just a pure kind of criminal gang gun crime. And that's the gun crime that we're noticing the difference. If you heard of a shooting, like it would be like once a year or something, like when I was growing up, and that now it's like now it's more common, unfortunately, because the type of gangs that have come over from Australia are more like, they do refer to them as American style gangs, but what I mean by that is they like that a gangster culture, like and that show of force. Whereas previously there were gangs in New Zealand, but they used to, and I've heard this direct from the New Zealand police, that previous gangs in New Zealand, they would negotiate and they might hurt each other, but there wasn't societal impacts, and they weren't going around making public kind of displays. So they would, if someone did something wrong, they would steal the other person's motorbike or something like that. I mean, I don't think traditional gun owners in New Zealand are farmers and people that like recreational hunting, and those people, I don't have any problems with registering their gun or having it in a locked safe or whatever they have to do. So that we haven't had, there was no pushback. The people that were impacted by the changing gun laws were people that perhaps didn't have it. Didn't want to comply for other reasons, I think, Yeah. But I must say, it would be, I think that is a good point, that I haven't seen much press about what the impact of the gun laws has been. So that would be quite interesting to know. I thought we already guns had to be registered. So I already thought that there was reasonable legislation relative to, say, US. I think there was already quite a bit of law in place before they put these new things in.
We heard that the new Prime Minister, Christopher Luxon, he was planning on changing some rules around the firearm laws. Do you know what some of those are, or if he was even planning to?
Some of the politics at the moment is going back a little bit, at the same as it is globally, to trying to reduce state interference and this concept of you don't want too much, which feels like that's a reflection of where the world is right now. It wouldn't be a complete reversal, I don't think, because people feel quite strongly about people are really worried about crime in New Zealand at the moment because of the stuff I talked about before. So I don't think it wouldn't be politically a very good move for him to loosen up too much of gun laws just to make hunters and stuff feel better. I don't think even hunters and things would be nervous about the rise in crime in their towns as well. So I don't think he would make big changes.
Would it be like safe to say that there is like a majority that's like against like changing the gun laws, or is that like wrong?
I think no, I wouldn't say there'd be a majority. I think it's hard to say. So few people own guns in New Zealand that the majority of the population would be supportive of increasing safety. But gun owners specifically may have a different perception, but they are very small. Like no one I know owns a gun. Do you know what I mean? Like that no one has guns in New Zealand from just a day-to-day in the city's perspective. It's really just farmers and hunters, and then farmers or people that hunt, or which again is quite a small population of people, and then criminals, I guess. So I feel like that has always come through, that people feel like they need to protect themselves from that kind of from all that time ago. Whereas in New Zealand, when people arrived, it already was like a bit of a, apart from the Maori people, the original like Indigenous people of New Zealand didn't have guns, but as soon as other people arrived, they brought the British kind of whole thing of there would have been police in place straight away. So there wasn't a concept, maybe. I mean, it's just speculation. New Zealand's considered one of the most trustworthy countries in the world. So I think that those things around that was perceived, maybe those changes might have helped with that, but I don't think it has changed. I think what is the reality is that New Zealand is becoming a more dangerous place to live because of some of the factors that I talked about. So that, yeah, but at the moment, I think these gun regulation changes, I don't think has changed. The reputation of New Zealand has always been quite positive, I think, from a crime perspective. Yeah.
You said earlier how there were these gangs moving into New Zealand from Australia. Do you think any of them might bring or increase the firearm rate of New Zealand?
Yeah, they have dramatically increased, and even the visibility of guns. Like we've had shootings on main streets close to where I live, which is so unbelievable that that's even happened, and that's gang related. That's those those type of gangs that I talked about before.
So you mentioned do you know like why they're like moving to New Zealand in the first place?
Yes, they're being sent by the Australian government because anyone that has if families used to move to Australia and you could do that without having to apply for a visa. So, you know, usually it's very hard to immigrate to a new country, but in that case, it was very easy, and it still is. If I wanted to move to Australia tomorrow, I can. But what's happened is when they're committing certain crimes in Australia, instead of they'll serve their jail time there and then they get put on a plane and sent straight back to New Zealand. And a lot of these people have never been to New Zealand before. So they don't have any family here. They don't know anyone. So of course they're just going to go straight into gang connections because they have no support structure here or anything. Like some of them have literally only been to New Zealand when they're a baby, you know, so they don't have family here. Their whole family is back in Australia. Yeah.
And finally, like I think like moving forward, what do you think is like the best strategy to ensure like that like citizens stay safe, but the government still like shows them that like they still trust their citizens?
Yeah, I do think that's really important that everyone knows that guns registered and that we have confidence that the people that own those guns have like the mental faculties to own those guns. So I think that is a really good way to keep people safe, because they're in the same way that we make sure that 5-year-olds don't drive cars. We've got to make sure that, you know, it's not asking, we don't think it's asking too much. I don't think it's asking too much for that.
Yeah. In our like research, we learned that like their main way of kind of regulating it was by installing like gun licenses and then having, you have to like show that you're responsible enough to own a gun. Do you think that's enough, or do you think they might have to do more?
I think that that's enough for now in terms of we don't have the problem with the Christchurch shooting, which was really sad, was that perhaps there were signs that the person didn't have that mental faculty to own a gun, and that was really sad. But our main problem with gun crime is not, I mean, those incidences and like similar to what you see in the US with the perhaps people that have emotional kind of problems. Though we're not seeing so much of that. So at the moment, for now, I think the gun regulation is addressing the right issues that we have in our country. The other problems that we're seeing with gun crime are not to do with those issues. So to get towards doing more than licensing would be more like, I guess you'd have to interview people, or I don't know how they do it, what would be extra, but that wouldn't address our main problem right now, which is people that are importing guns illegally and are not even registered at all.
Thank you so much.
Is this helpful? Yeah.
No, it was very helpful.
So helpful.
Okay, cool. Well, it's been really nice to meet you. I really hope that it goes well.
You too. Thank you so much.
Okay. Bye.
Hope you have a good day.
You too. Bye.
Bye.
Wow, thank you so much, Miss Lane. Let's break it down, Isla.
I think the most surprising thing was how much trust the government has for all the citizens.
Yeah, aside from farmers, gangs, and hunters, really no one owns guns, so it's like not that hard to not trust them.
So, was there anything interesting that y'all learned about how few people own guns in New Zealand?
Something that I thought was really interesting was how just a few years ago, police officers didn't even carry guns on them. They had their guns locked in their cars instead of on their belts. And guns weren't really that apparent in New Zealand at all back then. But now, because of the gangs moving from Australia, the firearm rate has gone up a lot.
Yeah, it's super easy to go and live in Australia. Like Miss Lane mentioned, she could move there tomorrow, and there would be like very few legal complications. And because of this, I assume it's probably easier for gangs and like unwanted criminals to, move into Australia. And what they've been doing is they've been sending gangs to New Zealand, and that's been spiking up the crime rate.
So, what does this mean for the new laws?
As Miss Lane mentioned, we don't really know the limits of the laws yet, but so far it seems that the government should trust their gun owners to use their weapons responsibly, unless they're proven otherwise.
So, what you're saying is that everyone should be able to carry out guns freely?
Not exactly. Laws are still in place where one needs to have a license to own a gun, but essentially anyone who wants to own a gun can if they pass all the legal regulations and standards.
Okay, so what happens if someone who is irresponsible gets control of a gun?
That's the big issue. Most citizens are responsible, but the main people who aren't are all the gangs that are moving from Australia.
But why though? Because aren't they just potentially endangering their citizens?
Yeah, so what Miss Lane actually mentioned was that prior to the church shooting, New Zealand was known to have very low crime rates. And even like after the church shooting, there still aren't as many crimes as compared to other countries. And globally, it's known to be one of the safest countries.
Got it. It seems like the citizens have shown over time that they can be responsible with their firearms.
Exactly, that's why there's some controversy with banning guns altogether, because citizens have shown in the past that they can be safe, and the government should be able to trust them now.
So, overall, there needs to be a mutual balance between the government and its citizens. The government trusts the people, and the people don't betray that trust.
That's a wrap on our episode. Gun control in New Zealand remains a complex and evolving issue with strong arguments on both sides. We hope today's discussion highlighted not just the reasoning behind different perspectives, but also the broader impact of these policies on public safety, individual rights, and government responsibility. Whether you support stricter regulations or advocate for personal freedoms, it's clear that this debate goes beyond statistics. It's about how a country balances security with its citizens' rights. As gun laws continue to be reviewed and challenged, staying informed and critically evaluating both sides is essential. Thank you for tuning in, and until next time, keep challenging, keep questioning, and keep getting into good trouble.
See ya.